What makes the Jackson State versus FAMU game so interesting and so difficult to predict is the fact that each team has a fatal flaw and their opponent is perfectly set up to attack it. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at the Cardiac Cats, Cardiac Cats, what they always say, right? Clark Atlanta. These guys, when I tell you, don't know how to have an easy game either way. Oh, my God, we're going to break that down in segment 3. Segment 2, there are 3 HBCUs at the top of the HBCU rankings, and each one of those guys are all in the NCAA FCS top 25. So I'm fascinated about that, and I want to break it down because that's really interesting, each team's path to that, okay? That being said, I want to kick it off with Jackson State versus FAMU. This is a game of such epic proportions. This is a game of such magnitude and such impact that just having it on Friday isn't enough. So I have to sprinkle a little something into this week. I couldn't wait all the way until Friday to give you this information because this game is so fascinating to me. This game is so interesting and it's so difficult to predict. And I know I don't typically predict anyway, but this is what makes it fascinating walking into the matchup. Jackson State has a fatal flaw and FAMU has a fatal flaw. And I think that each team is perfectly set up to take advantage of said fatal flaw. See, if you have an issue, no team's perfect, right? So there's a way to attack every single team. I was talking about North Carolina Central, and what set them apart is that I think you need a very specific type of quarterback to attack what has been their weak point throughout the season. But if I look at Jackson State and I look at FAMU, right? When I'm looking at the Tigers and the Rattlers, I do feel like they have a fatal flaw. For FAMU, it's their run defense. I don't believe that the run defense is good. And then for Jackson State, it's the secondary. So if you're looking at those fatal flaws, FAMU is perfectly set up to take advantage of Jackson State secondary, and Jackson State is perfectly set up to take advantage of a team with a poor run defense, right? Like when you just look at it, okay? Because here's the thing: every team has something wrong in a way to attack them, but not every team is set up to attack said flaw. For example, if FAMU has a bad run defense and they're going against a bad rush team, I probably feel a little bit comfortable that, hey, you just need to be all right. You just need to be your normal self. It probably won't get ugly. But that's not the case. In this situation, if you're evaluating fatal flaws, right? If you're evaluating fatal flaws, and I say FAMU has a bad run defense, Jackson State has questions in their secondary. And this isn't just coming from me. You ask people. You'll look at Jackson State's front seven, top tier. You look at Jackson State's front seven there. They have Joshua Nobles, who is top 2 in sacks, top 2 in tackles for a loss. You have him on that defensive line. I love their linebacking duo, but if you ask people what is the place you could attack them, they'll say the secondary. So if I'm evaluating weaknesses, if I'm evaluating fatal flaws, because I want to stress how important that this weakness can be to the team, it's the way that you can beat them. If I'm evaluating fatal flaws and FAMU has a poor run defense, and Jackson State has questions in the secondary. And I'm telling you that I really enjoy to watch FAMU's passing attack. I think they could take advantage of that. But then I look at Jackson State, and I really love the amount of running backs that they have that are uber talented. And I think that they can attack a poor run defense. Now it gets interesting because both teams are equipped to attack their opponents' weak points. but I also feel like both teams' weak points are set up to be attacked by the opponent's strengths. It's phenomenal. This is great football. This is when you sit down and you watch the game and say who's going to break first. Because, you know, when you look at Jackson State's running backs, if you're just looking at the stat line, they're talented, but I don't think the numbers jump off the page. You know, outside of Irv Mulligan, there's nobody else above 200 yards. And you look at a guy like Ahmad Miller. I think he's a great person to bring up because Ahmad Miller, he doesn't even have 100 yards yet. But if you look at everybody's yard per pop, I think J.D. Martin's the only one who's not at 5, and he's at 4.5. So if you're really looking at Jackson State's running backs, I hope that you listen to somebody who's watched them play. And I'm not saying that to tell you to listen to me. I'm not going to be as braggadocious to say that. But what I will say is go check out Tiger Talk. Go check out the 1400 Club. I'm telling you, go check out somebody who really watches Jackson State play. You'll hear how they'll speak about a player like Ahmad Miller. See, FAMU may stop Irv Mulligan. Are they going to stop Travis Terrell? That dude's a completely different type of running back. Are you going to stop an Ahmad Miller? Are you going to stop a J.D. Martin? Can you stop all of them? If Jackson State just really leans into the run, and it's funny because I was told this just generally, right? Not even about this game, but generally, if Jackson State were to run or lean into their run, their offense could take off, go through the roof. This is the game for Jackson State to lean into the run. This is the game for you to say Irv Mulligan's getting 15 carries. Travis Terrell's going to get 10. Ahmad Miller's going to get 7. J.D. Martin's going to get 9. This is the time for you to really go run heavy because I think FAMU is susceptible to it. I watched it in the Norfolk State game. I watched it in the Alabama State game. I watched it in the South Carolina State game. Like I watched it in all of these matchups. I know that they can be taken advantage of there. But like I said about Jackson State, if you ask about the Tigers defense, no one will tell you that it's weak. Don't allow me to tell you that it's weak. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is the front 7 is the dominant part of that defense. But people will tell you if you want, I had multiple people tell me, if you want to attack the Tigers, you got to get to the secondary. It's easier said than done, but we'll attack why it's easier said than done on our Game of the Week preview show on Friday. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. But FAMU has the second leading receiver in the conference in Jamari Gassett. They have the second leading passer in the conference in Daniel Richardson. Like if you're really looking at this, and the thing about Richardson that gets me is that he's difficult to bring down, which means he's going to scramble, he's going to run around, and he will get you in the backyard football. Do I want the second leading receiver in the conference going against a secondary that has question marks when we're playing backyard football and he has a connection with his quarterback? That sounds deadly to me. This isn't even on schedule plays of, all right, go run this 7, right? Like this isn't even just that. This is, it didn't work, but I escaped the pocket. I need to lock eyes with you. Can you cover me for 5 seconds? And it's hard to cover somebody for 5 seconds. I'm not even talking about somebody the caliber of Jamari Gassett. This is football, ladies and gentlemen. I can't wait. This is the type of game that I want to be there for. I wish I was present. I wish that I was actually in Jackson. This game right here is something that if you can't watch it, make sure you get it on DVR. I don't want you to go watch the box score. I don't want you to wait until I'm here to hear about the game. Watch it, then come here and listen to me talk about it. This is the game of the year. This is the SWAC game of the year and arguably the HBCU game of the year in a regular season setting. Celebration Bowl, obviously higher. SWAC championship, maybe can't even compete. I don't know. But I'm looking at games like that in the SWAC. Maybe Howard versus North Carolina Central. If Howard gets it together, maybe North Carolina Central versus South Carolina State. I'm sure you can hear the excitement in my voice. Even me listening to it as I'm saying it, I don't remember the last time that I was this excited about a game. It was probably week 1. It was probably week 1 or maybe after PV lost to Texas Southern, because that I just say that not to rub it in anybody's face, but you see the flag behind me, you know the history behind it, you understand the excitement and the emotion that came behind that game. I feel similar with a lack of investment. I feel similar, but a lack of investment in this game of that same caliber. Oh my God, this is a game I can't wait to watch, and it's on ESPNU because it deserves to be. But I'm not done talking about the Tigers. I'm not done talking about the Rattlers. As a matter of fact, I want to add some Eagles into the mix because North Carolina Central, FAMU, and then also Jackson State are all a part of the AFCA top 25 in the FCS. All right, let's get into it as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. The NFL is here. You got the Saints versus the Broncos on Thursday night. You have today, if you're catching this early enough on Wednesday, you have the WNBA Finals Game 3. So who you putting some money on in that? I can't wait, man. Sports are here. I'm ready to roll. The NBA is almost here. The MLB playoffs are still going on. You're almost to the World Series. You have big-time games. Texas versus Georgia is this weekend. You can make a lot of money over the next week if you go to FanDuel.com. If you're new to it, maybe you've been waiting, maybe you haven't been quite, even a little bit on the fence. Let it be known that right now is the time. And with a $5 bet, if you're new to FanDuel, you'll get $200 back in bonus bets. It's really not a losing situation. All you can do is win or win on a smaller scale. All you have to do in order to do this is go to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com. Go there and make every moment more. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On SEC. I told you, the biggest game of the weekend, Texas versus Georgia. You need to go ahead and check out Locked On SEC because they will give you the information in addition to Locked On Longhorns with my guy, Jonathan Davis. It's a big-time game. Make those two must-watch after this. Now, we've already looked at Jackson State versus FAMU and all of the weaknesses and the way that they can attack them. But at the same time, I want to give a little bit of appreciation. I don't want to look at, oh, well, they struggle here, they struggle there. I want to look at just genuine appreciation for the fact that there are 3 HBCUs currently in the NCAA top 25. We talk about our rankings every week on Wednesday. I think we're going to move that to 2. We are. I've confirmed that. We're going to move this kind of conversation to Tuesday starting next week as we get ready for MEAC practice or MEAC play. But we talk about these rankings and these lists on NCAA.com every single week, right? Shout out to Stan Beckton because he does a phenomenal job and we react to him. I want to change it up. Just in case y'all didn't know. It is NCAA Stan Beckton. I think I make it very clear every time that these are not my rankings because I'm reacting to them in a different way and I don't agree. It'd be weird if I had my own rankings that didn't agree, but he does a phenomenal job nonetheless. I think I rarely ever look at his rankings and say, what? How you doing that? But he had 3 teams, Jackson State, FAMU, North Carolina Central, in your top 3. The top 3 of our HBCU rankings are also all ranked nationally. And the road that these teams are taking to get there, I think it really shows a little bit of respect for HBCUs. I'm hoping that because that would be a sign of change. If it's a respect for HBCUs, a sign of change. And I've never wanted a pity party. I've never wanted a handout. I've never been wanting to give. I've never wanted to be given something because, well, HBCUs need it. So let's go ahead and make them a top 25 team. That charity stuff isn't for me. What it's for is, or what I want is a level of respect for the high level HBCUs. You typically don't see that, but I think the inclusion specifically of a FAMU, it really does show a little bit more respect for HBCUs. Okay, so just so we have the numbers out there, FAMU is 18, North Carolina Central is 21, and Jackson State is 25. I don't remember the last time we had 3 HBCUs in the top 25 polls during the season. I feel like FAMU maybe made 3 in 2022. So I know Central was ranked after the Celebration Bowl victory. I believe they were actually ranked before. Jackson State, of course, was ranked. They were ranked both years that Prime was here. I think FAMU made it because that was the year that FAMU made it to the FCS play. No, it's not. That's the year FAMU didn't make it to the FCS playoffs. So I think maybe they were top 25 because I feel like that was part of the reason that a lot of us were upset. If it wasn't that year, I don't think it happened. I don't believe South Carolina State made it that year that they won a Celebration Bowl. I know Jackson State did, and FAMU did because they made it into the playoffs. But I don't know if we've seen in the last 3 years that I've been doing this show. I don't know if we've seen 3 HBCUs in the FCS top 25 poll. This is very impressive. This is, for me, this is something that I want to sit and I want to really sit down in and I want to appreciate it and I want to take that in because this isn't something to scoff off. This isn't something to take lightly. FAMU is at 18, and they've only beaten HBCUs. Now you got to think about that, right? And I'm not overly. The thing about FAMU is they were there to start, so it's a little bit harder to take somebody out. But for them to move up the rankings while only beating HBCUs, right? Like you look at their schedule, they beat Alabama State, they beat South Carolina State, and then they also beat Norfolk State. You're looking at the losses that they've had is to Miami and Troy, so two FBS teams. No one's taking that against them. But for them to only beat 3 HBCUs and they climbed up 7 spots, that could have something to do with other people, right? Of course, teams have to lose for you to move up a lot of times, especially in that situation. But for FAMU, I'm looking at it like, man, you're only beating HBCUs. You're not even beating the highest level of HBCUs. I think if a victory here happens on the weekend, then you're looking at them climbing into the top 15 because Jackson State is a top 25 matchup, right? That's a top 25 team that you're facing. So they may climb into the top 15. FAMU may climb into the top 15 if they come out victorious. But so far, they ain't done that much, right? Like, what's their best win? And you still climbed up 7 spots. So I appreciate that. Same with Jackson State. Jackson State lost to Grambling. Jackson State lost to Grambling, and Grambling has now lost 2 games since. You're looking at what is Jackson State's best victory? I was watching ESPN, and you have to forgive me because this is going to sound like I'm taking people down, but I kind of have to show you how irregular this is because it's not like either one of those teams are doing something spectacular. Like I remember Central a couple of years ago, they beat FCS top 25 teams and then they earned their way into the top 25. These were huge victories. This isn't happening for a FAMU. This isn't happening for a Jackson State. It's really not even happening for a North Carolina Central. We'll get to them in a second. This is hopefully a sign of the tide turning. This is hopefully a sign of the tide turning. Because beating Southern could mean something. But this is the life that we live. Let me break this down to you. The life that we live is it's difficult for high-level HBCUs to get their respect and to get national acclaim. They get a little bit of respect, but for them to get national acclaim is difficult. We see this most often in basketball. I think it's most paid attention to in basketball because we've removed ourselves from the national landscape. In football, the conversation is only had when you're actually in the top 25, right? Like if we cared about the FCS playoffs and things of that nature, I think we would have a larger conversation about FCS polls, but we don't. So no one really talks about it until an HBCU is there. But you see this in basketball too. The reason it's difficult to get above a 16 seed or a 15 seed out of the first 4, the reason it's difficult to get out of there in seeding initially, the difficulty comes in the fact that they don't respect 80 to 90% of your league. Like Jackson State women's basketball has been phenomenal, but what brings them down is that they have to play a team like I don't want to slight nobody, but the majority of the league, like the majority of the league, I don't need to specify anybody because it really applies to pretty much everyone. They don't respect your competition. Even if they respect you, they don't respect your competition, and that always factors in. So for Jackson State to be able to hold a loss to Grambling and still come out here, for them to still come out here and be a part of the top 25, that speaks volumes. And I hope that it's a change of the guard. I hope it's saying, you know what, we recognize a top flight HBCU when we see it. There's a lot of multi-loss teams on here, so I'm not holding my breath that it's a change of the guard, but I will be paying attention. I won't hold my breath, but it will be something that I evaluate and look at as you push forward. Grambling, I keep wanting to say Grambling because they beat Jackson State. If Jackson State beats FAMU, you could see all 3 of these teams still here. Jackson State could rise. They would rise above FAMU. They would probably rise above North Carolina Central. And since we're talking about the Eagles, let's knock that out real quick. As far as the Eagles go, it's not as if they have that Elon loss that was pretty bad, but they have that Campbell victory that was really good. But yeah, it's an interesting one. These guys don't have the most fleshed out resumes this year, but they're still top 25. That could be indicative of how everybody else is performing, or it could be indicative of how they're approaching and evaluating HBCU resumes. I'm hoping it's the latter. But like I said, not holding my breath, just watching out. Speaking of watching out and holding your breath, speaking of holding your breath, really, Clark Atlanta don't know how to make it easy. They win hard, they lose hard. Everything is just difficult. So let's break down the Cardiac Cats as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time is the official ticket sponsor, right? Because there's no one I would ever go to other than Game Time. There's no one that's going to have the last minute deals. And me personally, I'm a procrastinator. Me personally, I'm going to wait to the last minute. And, I may even wait to the day before. I got it bad. And I'm always thinking I could get the best deal. Yeah, this is a good price, but it could go down. With Game Time, it doesn't make me regret my procrastination. They already have the best prices out there, right? If I book it 2 hours in advance, or if I book it 2 months in advance, it's still going to be great prices. But here's the thing that I love amongst everything else is two aspects of Game Time. One, I get to see the view of whatever I'm watching, whether it's the stage, the field, the court, whatever. I get to view that vision, or I get to see that view before I buy my ticket. And then I also get all-in pricing. So no more surprise fees, no more $30 tickets turn into $63 tickets. All you have to do to understand what I'm saying is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Now, Clark Atlanta doesn't know how to make it easy. This game against Central State went down to the wire, so much so that they say that the cameras or the broadcast actually clipped out. They went on to something else, man. I read about this. This was fascinating. That's how I heard about it. But when you go through and you look at the streak of close games that Clark Atlanta's had. First game, Fort Valley State, 45-32. Allen Elementary. What was that? Anyway, Allen University, 26-22. They had a Florida Memorial game that got suspended at 28-28. That probably would end up being a 1-point game, knowing them. Then you come back with the field goal as time expires to upset Bethune-Cookman. That was a huge victory. You look at the Lane College one. This is the most comfortable victory that they have. A 10-point victory over Lane College, 38-10. That was the game where you're like, oh, wow, they finally got to breathe easy, But it was a 7-point game for the majority of the fourth quarter, or for the better half of it. And even then, Clark Atlanta had to storm back with a field goal at the beginning of the fourth. They had to storm back with a touchdown in the middle and a field goal at the end. That's 10 points. That's a 10-point swing right there. Yeah, that's a 10. No, that's a 14. My math is wrong. Oh, yeah. Okay. It was actually 11. I think they had what's all my math right now? Y'all watching this live. I'm looking at, okay, so they're at 24. They got a field goal, made them at 27. Okay. So then they had a touchdown with a 2-point conversion, put them at 35, and they had another field goal. So now you're looking at 14 points. So a 14-point fourth quarter, which I could have just slid up and looked at the box score, but I forgot the exact numbers here. That being said, let's move on to the next game. So you had a 10-point game that you had to storm back and have 14-point fourth quarter just to come out victorious. The next one, you lose 28-35. It's really close there. And now against Central State, you need a touchdown with less than a minute left to win 25-20. I'm a real appreciator of what it is that Teddy Keaton is doing at Clark Atlanta. Winning close is not easy. Teams that come in and this is the thing. Teams that go from being really bad to being a good program, whether that be professionally, just being a good team, being a good franchise, a lot of times the ability to win close games, a lot of close games, does not happen in the year one of the turnaround, right? The first year you're good, you maybe be all right, but you don't close out the best. Teddy Keaton has Clark Atlanta closing out. They have them coming back. They have them believing in themselves until the final whistle. And that's how you're able to get last minute touchdowns. That's how you're able to get game expiring field goals. The Cardiac Cats, man. Cardiac Cats. Because if you're a Clark Atlanta fan, you could never breathe easy. Like I said, coming in, speaking of holding your breath, because that's what Clark makes you do at the end of every game. It's not they'll storm back. They did it against Fort Valley State. They did it against Lane College. They'll for the most part they're winning games. Right? They secure their first winning season in how many years? Right? Like they're 5-1-1 right now. They're 5-1-1 right now. They can't have a losing record. Clark Atlanta is reveling in the fact that they hired Teddy Keaton. Teddy Keaton fooling around have the best year of his career at Clark Atlanta in a first-year turnaround on that nice red turf. I need to get out there. So they got homecoming this week. Hopefully they don't have people holding their breath at homecoming, man. Like, we trying to hit the yard. We trying to enjoy ourselves. We trying to do all of that. Hopefully they don't mess things up. Let these people, because knowing them, they be like, look, we can't let them get on the yard too early. We need to score a touchdown with 5 seconds left. But Clark Atlanta, that's all I wanted to say. Call them the Cardiac Cats. I know it's a little bit cliche, but with them, it's very appropriate because they don't know how to win big. They only know how to take it down to the wire. They lose big. I mean, they lose small. They win small. This is a fantastic team to watch and a fantastic story to monitor. I can't wait to see how they play it out in the SIAC because they still got some big games left and they're still in the running to be a conference champion. So tomorrow's episode is Thursday, so you already know what's coming. Thursday, we are going to be previewing the biggest games that are not our game of the week. So the biggest games in HBCU football, one is going to be Tennessee State versus Howard as we lead and ramp up to Jackson State versus FAMU. Woo! Let me say again. Oh, yeah. I wish I could say play my music right now, but there's no music to play. Instead, I'll tell you to take care. Stay blessed. Peace.